Schaefer, and I'm the project lead on the Cohort exercise. I'm really excited to share with you what we have for our vertical slice demo today. Our game is about a punk teen named Ramona, who steps up to save the day when demons invade her school. The way she does this is she uses her holy electric guitar to use music in order to defeat demons with all her brazen focus. For us, our definition of vertical slice was to hit our visual target in our Catholic school's chapel and showcase the exorcism in our punk rock exorcist game, putting the exorcism in punk rock exorcist. Last month, we promised you a lot of art assets and to refine our rhythm-based combat, focusing in and kind of spiraling in on our gameplay. We are really happy to say that we were able to successfully complete most of them, and instead of doing a enemy ranged attack, we reprioritized and brought you exorcism and very cool. Our vertical slice demo is a story of spiraling in on our things that we thought make our game. The way we did that was we followed a few guidelines. We iterated early and often. We didn't get attached to any one idea. We followed the fun, and we followed the fun to find the wow factor. And that's how we turn spaces like this into this. I will also talk about how we iterated a little bit in our art. This was our original concept of Ramona. We felt it read 80s and schoolgirl more than it did punk, so we redid her. She has hand-painted textures, a facial rig, and as you can see, we removed the skirt so we can have more diverse animations and really lean into our couture. We mocapped all of our animations, and Ramona should have an idol, 3 attack animations, a run, and a hurt. Ramona was mocapped by our lovely Lace and Crimson Knight, so thank you, Lacey. And one thing I really want to point out to you guys is for our 3 attacks we have to show you today, one of them is light, one of them is heavy, one of them is special. We wanted that to be reflected in our animations. This one is done in 2s, which is what we're going to bring to you in March across all of our current characters. As you saw, that previous one was heavier. This one's the most taxing on Ramona, so she has to step back. And I believe she has one more animation. Yeah, her animation, because she's getting screamed at by these half notes. She covers her ears. You may have seen Ramona cupping her hand in those mocap animations. That is an open space for her guitaring maelstrom. This is how she uses her holy power to exorcise these demons. It took us 27 hours to go from concept to hero asset in the game. There's some really fun details on this guitar, like Ramona writing her name on the back, just how it's all painted all over. It really just shows how Ramona takes care of the things she loves most. This is our enemy, our half note. You can notice some details of green and purple. We wanted those to be in our environment. The colors for our demonic energy. So when you're seeing these environments destroyed by these demons infecting them, you'll see it through green and purple. Our half notes have multiple animations. This is our idol, the twitchy, they're buggy, both in the insect sense and the software sense. We wanted them to still seem a little bit electric, again, Daft Punky, but we also want them to have this sort of eerie, bug sort of like this is the animation you see when they run at you. The previous one was them patrolling. I believe this is their attack animation. Both of our characters have facial rigs, and you can see we're putting it to good use with our attack animation. This is one of the death animations. We have 2 of them. This one is more crumbling into itself. The other is a little bit more robotic. It's almost like a little wind-up doll, if we call that. And then this is our other run. our Pennywise run for our pull notes that we have in our demo. We wanted each run to be a little bit different, so like you could tell the different types of and this is it. I want to talk a little bit about our texturing process because we are using asset packs for the majority of our meshes inside our demo environment. So where we added our flair was our hand-painted textures. We really want this story to be similar to our reference, which is comic books. So we're using a lot of real comic book techniques in texture assets, characters, and the environment for it. But you can see here we're using like these selective shading, hash marks, and here are a few of our visual effects. This is our half note screen from the front. We have another from the side, and then we have two more shots of our area effect attack, our uproar, and our sonic blast, which is our hit scan. I want to talk a little bit also about how we iterated design in our chapel level that we wanted to go through. This is our overall game loop that we have showing you in January, and this is what we're showing you in the demo. We have our chapel and like a quick. But yeah, this is, I'm going to get into a little bit about how we iterated a little bit on the chapel. We were looking at it and we thought it's kind of not grand. It's not impressive. It's not what you would think of when you're thinking of a Catholic school and you're thinking of a really well-funded place in the area. So we're like, how do we add that element of grandness? And we looked at multiple different references, like real cathedrals, real Catholic schools, and the chapels that they had. And our wonderful level designer, Jenna, was able to put together this amazing second iteration where you're able to like draw your eye to the center with a big focal point and stained glass there. This is our set dress before we added any of our own custom textures. And then this is after we textured the door, the walls, added a bit of our own flair and some lighting, our own stained glass, the altar, that wonderful pillow helped us make. So, you see some God rays. We wanted this to be a wow moment for the player. We want them to enter and be able to go, I get to fight something here, you know, get excited. So I also want to talk about the level we're going to be bringing you in March a little bit, so you can understand that process. We also wanted to make sure any sort of elements we were adding to the chapel were going to be reflected in the school. But originally, it was looking more blocky. It was reading public school. It wasn't, the lighting wasn't leading the player anywhere. And even when it was set dressed, it wasn't wowing you. You could turn the corner and it was the same as before. So we decided to change that. We decided to frame the halls, add crowning, make sure the classrooms were distinct from each other. We changed the shape of the auditorium. Again, we pulled a lot of reference from real Catholic schools. We want to have more of those turning the corner wow moments. And currently we're in a stage where it is blocked out. But in March, we want to make sure this gets to a part where it can be functional. Another thing we're focusing on for this school level that we want to bring in March is working on our action blocks. Again, like I said, we want you to turn a corner and be wow. We want you to be caught in gameplay and caught in this rush throughout the entire time. We want the player to be ready. So as you can see here, we're seeing a lot of these wow moments, these visually stunning action blocks our level designer Helen has come up with. We've already prototyped some in the scene itself, and we plan to do more in the March. This is one more. Yeah. Again, we really are trying to lay on thick that these demons are invading, they are infecting, and we want that to be reflected in every space. I also want to talk about the mechanics for a second, though, and talk about how we kind of spiraled in on them this month and brought fun to the functionality. This is a quick refresher. Our main mechanic, it takes 2 button presses on beat to release a chord. A chord is an attack. So the first beat figures out if it's a light, heavy, or special. The second hit releases it. You can see that circle right there whenever you're button pressing. The white circle appears whenever the white circle will appear whenever you first press the button, and then the red will narrow in and cover the white circle whenever it's the second beat. We did that to help the player read our rhythm mechanic a little bit better, on top of adding some UI elements that are pounding to the beat. These are again just our mechanics that we plan to show in the demo today. The sonic blast, this is our hit sign. We've done a lot of things to help it be easier for the player. We want our player to think about the rhythm of the game, the music of the game, hitting on beat in game. We don't want them to worry about aiming as much. So whenever you have an enemy you're locked onto, the player will automatically turn to them. We did that for ease of the player so they can focus on what we care about the music. We also will have unique sounds for each chord use. So again, like I said, the chord is the two combo engaged. So the sonic blast will have a different sound when engaged than the up chord, and so will the dissonance. Another thing we did for more readability for the player is to make sure our visual effect and our animation happen one beat after we've engaged our chord. It helps our influence in our playtesting, it reads a lot better. We've also changed a lot of our AI. We wanted to add some more like pack tactics. So you can see here right now, there are 4 enemies, and once you kill one, the 4th would be allowed to join. Otherwise, it hangs that back, so the player isn't overwhelmed. Another thing, we want to focus on playtesting. So on top of having controller functionality, we have button remapping. We did this so we could have the largest pool of playtesters possible, and so they would have the accessibility to use whatever device they need. So I'm going to get into some metrics of what we've gathered over the last month. We have, due to us spiraling in the design, kind of narrowing in and iterating there, we have recovered design capacity by 20% from the meetings, whereas in January we were designing 75 hours of meetings. In February we reduced it to 2 because they were able to hone in on these things that make our game fun. Across the board we reduced the amount of time we spent in meetings, and this is definitely something that we want to maintain. Over the past 3 sprints, we were able to gather a sense of velocity. We had overall 151 story points, and divided by our 3 sprints, that technically comes out to 183 story points per sprint. However, you can tell in January we were learning how to use Jira, and this is vertical slice. So I would not say this is indicative of our actual velocity, and I'm excited to see more data as we gather it, and what our pace actually is. We are also, part of that is getting accurate estimates for these story points. And when I was looking at the data, I found our programming team was the most accurate whenever estimating how long work would take. And across the board, all of us were overestimating. So that is definitely something we're going to be working on going forward. I was correct last status update. Art definitely had the most tasks. As you can see here, they had 92 tasks, and not just art alone. Over 50% of the work held for vertical slice, which makes sense. We're reaching our visual standard. We're setting it, and if we set that bar, we wanted to set it high. This also breaks down each individual asset that we were retexturing or creating, and all the little steps it takes to do that. But I definitely, and I'm going to be talking about this a little bit in the next coming slides, but I definitely want to make sure our task distribution is a lot more even going forward. And part of the way, and this is why. So, going into vertical slice, our sprint 5 was, we didn't have an even burn down chart, to say the least. And the reason this occurred is because we had a massive backlog for vertical slice. A lot of it was individualized, broken up little tasks for art, and it was retroactively added. So we had over 400 story points, and we were able to complete 150 of them. but it bled into the next sprint, which is where most of them got completed. Which is amazing, by the way. 348 story points completed in basically a week. Incredibly impressive. Really proud of my team there. But we have identified a bottleneck in the art pipeline, and we're going to be talking about ways to overcome that in our retrospective later this week. But our big takeaways from all the data I just talked about are that focusing on iteration and workflows really reduces meeting times, so having that clear documentation ahead of time really helps. Our tasks aren't evenly distributed, and we wanted to fix that going forward. And our current velocity is hard to gauge with our overestimation and our sprint planning mistakes that we have currently. We want to implement this workflow going forward, where it's very similar to what we had before, but the biggest change is that instead of doing our backlog by sprint, we're switching it to by milestone. So we will let you know how that goes. But to summarize, because of what we have learned, we're going to try to distribute our tasks by asset and make sure that pipeline flows throughout the month evenly. We'll be distributing tasks evenly across teams and designing a rubric for iterations and for what polished looks like for our quality of our mechanics and of our art. Speaking of, I want to talk about some totals of how long it took us to get to where we are visually. For 2 characters, it took 284 hours. For our comic book textures, building in one environment for chapel, it took 36 hours. For our one hero asset, because we share our texture artist and our environment artist, the same person, it's 11 hours. We were able to finish one environment in 46 hours, and our visual effects, we were able to create 5 in 30 hours. Using this data, we're able to project that because we're using asset packs, we'll be able to create 9 hero asset textures, 22 prop asset textures, and 45 background asset textures with our current manpower. If we train more people to texture and have onboard more people to help, that might be able to expand. For our character projections, this includes the rig, the animation, the modeling, and the concepting. Because of our archhuman having 4 arms, I have overestimated a little bit for him, where it'll be 110 hours due to some animation and mocap complications. And if we have time, I would love to have our Homo mini boss, but it entirely depends on how Jim Morgan pans out. For visual effects, we'll be able to have 2 custom visual effects. For environmental visual effects, showing that demonic influence in our environment, we have had before, and adapted from asset packs visual effects, stuff like pheromones, attacks, and stuff, we have time for 10. For levels, because our school ground floor and auditorium is in a prototyping stage, and it took us 58 hours to get there, I estimate us to finish with set dressing and action blocking at 60. And with our second floor and our chapel, which we have already done, reaching visual target, that took 46 hours, and I estimate it will take 8. So to summarize, I added up all those estimations. So we'll be able to create 2 characters, 76 textures, 2 environments, 2 hero assets per level, and 60 but again, all that data came from the wonderful accomplishments we were able to have this month, and being able to spiral in on our mechanics. For next month, we want to bring you some concepts of our archdemon. We want our second floor blocked out to the state our current auditorium level is at. We want our auditorium environment set dressed and lighting tested, action block, and we want to have more hand-painted textures. On the mechanics side of things, we want to continue action blocking. We want to learn how we can teach our player about our mechanic because it can be a little bit complicated. We want functional UI. We want to implement our power slide, our movement attack mechanic. We want to do some tools research for our programmers to get a portfolio of these things. And we want to continue developing our AI to make sure it continues to be fun. But with the development we've done so far, we've been able to find some lists. Currently, our texture budget is 1 gig over, so we believe we'll be using March to optimize that a little bit better. WYs, we want to be able to make our sound effects blend in with our background soundtrack. And in order to do that, it will take some learning there. So just onboarding on WYs and getting people interested in that tool will take some time, but it's a low risk. We are using asset packs, and these asset packs have UVs that are unfamiliar to us and are unoptimized. And because we are doing this really interesting campaign texture that we need to use those UVs for, we really don't know what we're opening up whenever we use these asset packs. So when we were making our visual target, that became an issue, and going forward, I did a lot of time for it in my projections. We also want to optimize our game so we can play on any system, and just in general play smooth. And this will just eventually just take time and testing. And I know we wanted to also integrate gas and make sure our system is also. But this is our roadmap and how we want to bring it to you. I'll explain it a little bit better. But concepting and prototype, if I want to illustrate an example of that, I would say the school level that I showed you briefly before, that is in this little pink phase, concepting and prototype. I would say our demo right now that we have for you isn't functional. And with your feedback today, maybe we can make it shippable, which would be on Steam. And then after that would be polished. It's a portfolio piece. We're extremely proud to show it, and we want to get a job of it. And then, by of course, by our final presentation, we're going to ship it. But these are our wonderful employees, and we have a very exciting demo here. Our half notes on the thing. Using that circle to hit on beat. Spinning our characters to look at our half note whenever we attack. Right now, Elon's been using a sonic blast. I'm going to show them an uproar. And so you can hear us get the sound effect. We can also show them a dissonance, which will march her back. Looks like we're gonna exercise. That's fun project.
Is a feature that we don't have implemented yet called the uncle meter, which is kind of like a good way for the player to get some good feedback on how well they're doing, and they can build this meter to build up to the ultimate attack.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Perfect. Yeah, I think that sounds good. I do think it's nice for the moment-to-moment gameplay, but I like the idea of having something to build, and then being able to pull off an ultimate feels like a great way to reward that. I'll stick in gameplay for a second. The pack mechanics that you showed off, where somebody delays entering the fight. I noticed that you had some other plans to improve the pack mechanics. Is the idea that they're going to perform strategies together then, or are we just trying to limit who gets into the fight and who doesn't? Or are they actually going to try to move and collaborate in their attacks?
So for Cohort Exorcist, we really want to incorporate rhythm in a lot of our mechanics.
Yeah.
And with the pack mechanics, we want to integrate a pattern system where when each enemy that has a ticket to attack on the queue, what would happen is they're going to wait until they enter a radius, and then they would then attack one beat after the next.
Okay. And you using the beats to sort of drive that, kind of like you would in like a, like in like a video.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Fun. Still on gameplay. Sorry, must be a question more than feedback here. I guess I'm not seeing it. Do you guys have? Are there defensive actions in the game? I saw one where you push people back, but are all of your chords attacks, or are there also defensive actions?
Yes, so for what we showed you, they're all offensive stuff. There's some other stuff right now that we don't have in the demo. So there's two things that we're looking to implementing, which are the spray can and the power slide, which allow Ramona, I guess the power slide specifically, allow Ramona to keep the evading attacks and also kind of be bold in some way where she can slide into targets and they'll send them up. And then maybe for something for after that you can finish the board. And then alternatively the spray can, which would stun and blind the demons a little bit, making them unable to target Ramona during greater time.
Great.
So yeah.
Yeah, I do think that would be nice additions, because otherwise, there's nothing wrong with it, just like a smash 'em up kind of game, but it feels like you've got an opportunity to build a more intricate strategy system where you can interlead offensive and defensive movements or chain things, which would be really nice. Okay. Yeah, so on the presentation, I had a couple notes. One thing, I did notice when you move from section to section in your presentation, you tended to just kind of blow right into the next topic without giving time to appreciate the fact that you're changing here. We're going from the features we delivered into our metrics, and going from our metrics into something else. I would recommend, I don't know if transitional slides are the right thing, or just maybe as the presenter, taking a pause and that's what we had to talk about for our features. The next topic I'm going to get into, and like slow down those transitions a little bit, because it's a little bit disruptive. It's when you're following like, feature, oh no, that's metrics. And you did say, now I'm going to talk about metrics. So in each of those places where you're moving to a different topic, giving us time to breathe would be really nice. All right, the last thing I'll talk about, and then I'll hand it over. Oh no, I have one quick thing. Texture budget over 1 gigabyte over. What does that mean for you?
So,
like, how did you determine your budgets, and what does being 1 gig over? How does it hurt you?
So when we booted up the demo, we noticed that all of our textures took a second to load up.
Okay.
Basically in Editor, when we're working on the game, because our textures are over budget, some of our textures are big, some of our VFX are causing a bit of issues. Some textures just straight up won't load.
Okay.
Which can cause problems, especially if you need that one thing to load, but then you have to go over and open it up somewhere else and it might update it. But yeah, we've been struggling with, as we've been implementing more textures, especially with these asset packs, that nothing's optimized. So it's been putting us over texture budgets, specifically in editor, but in the build, textures do load, they do take a second.
Okay, so not so much like the problem with like system resources or anything like that.
No.
But the loading time of those and how they impact your workflow are the main
Yeah.
reasons that are driving the focus on texture budget. Right, last topic then, actual last topic, is I just want to talk a little bit about story points and hours, and because you said something that was a little bit concerning to me, which is this is what our story points are doing, and we need to get better at estimating because we're, you know, the programmers estimated there's better and other people, but story points aren't hours. Story points aren't time. And I think I want to caution you to be really, really careful changing your system for measuring story points. My experience, the way that story points work best is that they are a measure of effort and risk, and they are on some system that you estimate based upon. And it doesn't have to correspond to hours or anything else. It is a number that means the same thing over and over again as you use it. And maybe you learn from it and you adjust your estimates because, oh, that thing had a lot more risk or it took a lot more effort than we thought it was going to, and so the next time you bump that up. But you're not doing it based on the clock time or the hours. You want to be based on, you know, just effort and risk. And then that is one number system, and then your hours is another number system, and your velocity is the way that you convert between the two, right? So the thing that changes, ideally, in a good process is your velocity, not the way that you come up with that story point number, but try to map it to something else. So I would be very careful about changing the way that you do your estimation to conform to time. That's the big thing.
I think I'm a little bit confused, but I will come and follow up with you first.
Happy to, yeah, no problem. I can. This is something I've got a bit of experience with, so I'd be happy to kind of talk to you about it more.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you guys turn the sound off and load your try to point out something that seems visually. Okay, so the first thing I noticed, I think this might be happening because of the technique that you guys are doing for your tuning lines. Are you guys doing post-processing like this?
No.
No?
No, I've turned that off. It was causing too many glitchiness issues where sometimes it would appear and then it would flicker.
Okay.
So,
So there must be something different.
On the
So
floor.
do you see the floor,
Yes,
the walls,
that's-
how there's like this double?
it's part of the asset pack issue that we're running into. It's an issue with the normals on the asset pack because the normals and our texture don't hook up. But
Okay.
yeah.
Why not just turn the normals off?
Because then the ORM of the, if you turn the normal, I tried changing the normals to just flat normals,
Yeah.
but the ORM still has these lines. I attempted to get them to line up, but we're just basically gonna have to scrap the entire floor and
So
that's a different
my
thing.
big comment about everything I'm seeing that you guys are doing is, I don't think you arrived at what your style actually is yet. Okay? The closest I think you are right now is Borderlands, and I probably have the biggest issue, like with companies trying to do this comic book look. Borderlands to me arrived in this place where they have pretty realistic textures on top of their line work and everything. And it works, but it's still problematic. I think it's a difficult problem to kind of solve, right? So right now, I need to try to see you guys be consistent with environments and characters, right? Because like in the animation world, you can see like Disney, what they did with the painterly backgrounds, with the cell shaded thing over the top. You gotta arrive at some kind of formula for like, what are we gonna do for environments? What should environments look like? And what should be happening for characters? Because if we're not careful, everything just becomes noise. It just becomes too much to look at, right? I did talk to you guys and your team about what to do, like with the line work, how much detail you're putting into characters. And when you first showed off your stuff, I was a little bit concerned because you guys put a bunch of paint splatters all over the character and everything, and you have this line work. But as we get into the game, that kind of went away because of what's going on with Whitey. Like, I don't hardly see anything on her pants except for that little paint splotch on her left hip, right? It's almost like whatever you guys got going on with the lighting at times, it's almost like the lighter stuff is like a neon effect where it's like, okay, this is definitely light, right? So normally with the comic book look or this cell shaded thing, you have in your shader, you've got a thing that does 3 different tones within the shading, right? So you got your mid-tone for things, you got a darker tone, you got a lighter tone for your highlight. And then you put shadow information over the top of that, right? If you try to do this realistic rendering style on top of that, it becomes like you've got this weird hybrid situation that's a little bit difficult to solve, right? Like right now, you got realistic looking soft shadows on the floor, but in a more graphical world, your shadows should be more hard edged and just have very little blur to that at all, right? You can see the thickness of the line work on the floor and how thick those lines are compared to, like right now, on your character, I don't really know where any line work is on the character because you got to think about like how big is the character going to be on the screen and what's happening. And as I was watching you guys play, what I noticed is like all the detail that you guys put into this stuff is just kind of going away because it gets so small. So if you know that like for the most part, this is going to be our camera distance, this is going to be roughly where the character sits, you really need to build your line work for that distance and make sure that you're focusing on bigger shapes, bigger forms, bigger line work to make sure it actually reads. Otherwise, you're going to spend a whole lot of effort and you never actually see it, right? You might see it in some cutscenes and stuff like that, but then that's a different scenario to build for altogether, right? So I think you guys really need to go through the level, go through with the level with your cameras and kind of understand like, okay, from this distance, we need this type of line work. And you need to do it for environment pieces and especially for your characters that you guys got. There were times that I did like, I don't know, can you go to that part where you did this very comic booky thing and I don't know how to describe it other than you changed the lighting on it and then the half note was like in your face and everything and it was like you did your sound effect, not necessarily this. You remember the boom? Did you do that?
Yeah.
There was that sequence where I was like, I can clearly see stuff. This feels like it's reading, and it's like you guys changed the lighting scenario and everything else for that. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it difficult to get?
Okay. We don't officially want to keep it to that, but we can take it.
Okay. So, and as you went in through the environment, I like what I'm looking at. It's just it's like the character is so dark right now, right? I can't see the character, and now I can see the character. Now I can't see the character, right? So it's like. You guys are going to have to be very strategic about what you do with lighting, what you're doing with your line work, shading, and then there's something about that effect whenever you did that. It's almost like you did this completely different lighting scenario, and you're like, hey, let's make this as comic book as possible or whatever, and it really worked for me, and it kind of stood out. The last thing I'll just say about this, super cool, right? I kind of caution you guys about doing this, where if you guys build in your lighting scenarios into your characters, you're basically baking your lighting into things. So as cool as it looks graphically, it's not really going to make sense under different lighting scenarios where you got a light overhead and whatever, and then you guys have done this very specific paint in for where line and color and lighting is, and then you're locked into that, right? Really what I think should be happening is that should be coming from the shader. You do have line weight that you've baked into things or whatever, but your lighting should still be able to have a dynamic component to it. Otherwise, you're going to get in this weird scenario where you got dynamic lights and things like that, and it's like, where's the light coming from? Right? So, I think there's really cool effort. I think you guys really need to think about, like, you chose a difficult problem, rendering-wise, and I think you're going to think hard about this.
Usually like a little overtime, if we get time for one more. And then Ron usually types those. You said So, for overtime, and I'm not gonna make people stay later, because I know people start catching up with, so I'm gonna go with that. And the people who haven't gotten to speak, if you could please send your. Right, that's okay.